I didn't hear you come in. Best night ever. Guess who made dessert? Let me know when you're in the mood.
Yeah, I will.
Hello, my name is Danny and you're watching the GameCyc review for 12 Minutes, an interactive thriller game that came out recently, and so I decided to check it out on Game Pass rather than continuing trying to play Tunic and failing miserably. Review on Tunic might come at a later date once I figure out how to stop sucking at it. So what exactly is 12 Minutes? It is essentially a mystery adventure game. You play as the husband of a couple, and he is stuck in this 12-minute time loop and he has to try and stop something terrible from happening. And every time he fails, the loop starts again, and you have to use your knowledge from the previous 12 minutes to try and make some kind of progress and figure out what exactly is going on, what you can do to stop the terrible thing from happening, why is a terrible thing happening, all that kind of fun stuff. It's kind of, yeah. So there are quite middling opinions about this game so far. It hasn't exactly wowed everyone upon its release, so I'll start with some positive stuff to balance out all the negative stuff I'm going to say later on. And we'll start with the presentation. There are some good aspects to the presentation, both in terms of the visuals and the audio that is provided in the game. You play it from a top-down voyeuristic kind of perspective where you look into the apartment where this game takes place in. There's only 3 rooms, it can be quite claustrophobic, but it works really well for the story that is being told and the atmosphere that they're kind of going for. So it's not exactly, photorealistic, it's not super high-end graphics. But you can kind of forgive a lot of it because it doesn't take away too much from the focus. However, one thing in terms of the presentation I really couldn't forgive was the animations. Animations were sometimes cool, they were sometimes okay, they were sometimes natural looking and it looked fine. Other times it looked completely jank and for some reason arms would flail all over the place and it looked like disused Sims 1 animations. And another thing I noticed is that characters' mouths don't move. And again, if you're viewing this game from the top down, not really that much of a big deal because you never see it. But there are times when you will see characters' heads or mouths or eyes and you notice none of them move. There are times when a character can pass out or go to sleep and you will see their eyes are not closed, which can take you out of the moment. So the visuals aren't exactly top tier and it does pull you out of the experience every so often, which is a shame because the sound design on the other hand does an amazing job of grounding you in this setting.
Sir, move to a safe place. We're sending a unit right away. They'll be there in 15 minutes.
15 minutes? That's not gonna do me any good.
Sir?
Please, can they get here any faster?
They'll be there.
Come on, I know you're home. Open the door.
What the?
A lot of work has gone into making this feel like a realistic space in terms of the sound design and the soundscape. The way footsteps can be heard, the way simple actions all have a sound to them, the way you're able to tell what's going on in other parts that you can't see, but you're still given the audio cues to understand what is happening and so you can make further decisions. And it all lends itself to a wonderful sense of tension that other games with bigger budgets and bigger scope and more dazzling aesthetics would probably really try to strive for, but they don't get it, but fail in comparison to how 12 Minutes handles it. So I'd say that's one area that does do very well. And one thing I want to say is just on the voice acting. So one of the ways that this game was marketed and one of, kind of the top build elements of this game is the fact that it's got 3 Hollywood A-listers as its cast. You have Daisy Ridley, James McAvoy, and Willem Dafoe. Now, Willem Dafoe is Willem Dafoe. You hear the voice of his character and you're immediately like, oh, Willem Dafoe's in this game. However, Daisy Ridley and James McAvoy, 2 actors who have English accents, normally, or are English as far as I know, both do American accents in this game. And they sound absolutely nothing like their normal selves or how you would recognize them if you were to see them in anything else.
In the next few minutes, a cop is gonna knock on a door.
What are you talking about?
The cop, he's gonna accuse you of killing your father.
What? My dad had a heart attack. You sound crazy, dude.
And if it weren't for the fact that their names were emblazoned all over the opening credits of the game and in all the marketing and the trailers and all that stuff, I never would have known that it was them. So it kind of brings up the question of why spend all that money on these performers who then don't do anything noticeable with that performance. Now, I'm not going to criticize those two too much because, you know, they're obviously both good actors and I believe they've both done voice acting for other things as well. But there's nothing really noticeable about the performances of either of them, which kind of begs the question, why not just hire American voice actors? And people probably wouldn't have noticed. But you imagine it's probably a case of this is another way to get attention on the game. Again, there isn't anything bad with the performances. It's not a negative performance or anything like that, but it also doesn't stand out massively. Moving on to gameplay. So this game has been marketed as some kind of special, never before seen kind of game, and they have called it an interactive thriller in all of the marketing. It's essentially a classic adventure game, but with a more unique setting and the unique angle of having it set within a time loop. I call it an adventure game because it is a game where you pick up and use different objects in various different ways with other objects or characters to try and get different results. You know, you pick up the slice of cake and then you click on your wife character, or you click on the table, or you click on the fridge and see which one will stab you afterwards. So that's pretty standard adventure game fare. What is unique is the time loop aspect, where after 12 minutes or after certain things happen to certain characters, the game will reset to 12 minutes prior. Everything is reset, everything is exactly the same except your character's memory. He will remember things that he learned in the previous loop, or things that were discovered or found, or answers to questions that he may have asked. And then you are able to use this information to try and make further progress in the next loop, and the whole goal is working towards trying to find a solution as to why this is happening. And the biggest risk with adventure games is the use of so-called moon logic, where to solve a problem you have to carry out a combination of actions that might have made sense to the dev team but wouldn't make sense to anyone else. And to the game's credit, I couldn't recall any instances of major moon logic. The only instance that felt a bit bullshitty was the one time I failed a loop because I didn't do one extremely minor action, and getting punched in the face as a result of that seemed kind of excessive, but whatever. And to continue to be positive about this, for a game about playing through a time loop of 12 minutes over and over and over again, it is kind of clever in how it makes the first half of the game not repetitive. It does this by making it so that you don't have to follow one path just to keep making progress. Even though you're playing through the same 12 minutes over and over again, the game is designed in a way that you have to follow different paths to be able to make different bits of progress. You're not just constantly asking the same questions over and over again and making a little bit of progress. You'll ask questions down one particular route, and then after you get answers to those questions, you'll try a different set of actions, now knowing that additional information. The game does extremely well in that first half to avoid repetition, to keep things interesting and to keep things fresh, and to kind of keep you guessing as to where is this all going. However, my criticism about what happens next is kind of hidden in that compliment. All that positive stuff is in the first half to first 2/3 of the game. From the final half to a third of the game, it becomes a massive grind. Because once you have a rough idea of what you need to do, the amount of progress you make seems to get smaller and smaller with every time loop. You're spending ages carrying out all the same actions just to have some arbitrary small tiny mishap force you to start all over again and carry out all of those same actions once more. And there was one point where I had to use a guide to figure out how to continue, because it seemed like I had reached the end with no obvious way to carry on with the game, and I was going a bit mental, and I just kept killing everyone else and myself in various different ways just on the off chance that that's how you get to the ending of the game. Spoiler alert, it's not. But just to get back onto the positive side of things, I will say that the amount of permutations in response to your actions and when you carry out those actions is actually kind of impressive. It's amazing how many times the game will throw you a new scenario based on now what you know and what you're doing when you're doing it and who's around you when you're doing it. And I'm going to assume this is why the game took about 7 years to be released, because this game is not long, it is not content heavy in the traditional sense. It's not, you know, like a million different locations or a million different characters. It's a limited number of characters in a limited number of settings, but the amount of different things that can happen in those settings is probably what caused this game to take so long to develop. And having that kind of variety and outcome is really impressive and really cool, and probably will lead to a lot of replayability for some people. But besides that, there isn't really too much here that is too notable from a gameplay point of view. And that means that we're left with just the story, which with it being an interactive thriller is obviously very important. For this first part, I will leave all the spoilers out just to keep some level of professionalism. When I do get into spoiler territory, I'll throw up a sign so you can go run away or whatever. So the setup of the story is that you play a guy coming back from work to a seemingly regular evening with your wife. All of a sudden, someone purporting to be a cop breaks into your house, accuses you and your wife of some dastardly nonsense, and then it all gets very horrifying and violent. And then all of a sudden, time rewinds to 12 minutes ago to when you first got home. You, as the husband, remember all of this happening, and so naturally the husband is quite terrified about what is going to happen next. And then once he gets used to the idea of being stuck in a time loop, he then goes into detective mode trying to figure out what is happening, why is this cop coming to attack you guys, and what can you do to solve it, basically. The plot of the game is relatively straightforward, but it's the delivery of the story that is very interesting. The way you are able to organically get new information with every loop, the way you're able to experiment with different outlandish ideas to get new clues, and the way you're able to make use of the dialogue system to ask the right questions to get more information. But after a certain point, the information and the dialogue stops flowing as freely, and the repetition starts to set in, and it becomes more of a grind, each loop trying to reach a conclusion. The story's conclusion itself isn't really that satisfying either. There is a twist, and instead of it being something that had potentially been telegraphed earlier that would have made the player go, ooh, it's instead some bullshit out of nowhere that feels like it's just there for shock value. And there are multiple endings, but the one I got was just so unsatisfying that it didn't leave me with a good final impression of the game. Spoiler alert now as we get into some of the specifics. Skip to this time here if you don't want to hear it. I do recommend people trying out this game if they have Game Pass. It's on there, it's available, it's a short game, and it's kind of unique even though it's flawed, so I still recommend people trying it out. For people who've already played it or people who just don't care, spoilers in 3, 2, 1. There is indeed a twist, but it is really, really dumb. I heard someone describe it as the equivalent of something like Oscar bait, but for video games. Essentially, you find out that your wife is your half-sister and that you killed your dad. And just conveniently, you forgot about these very important moments in your life. When I first heard that there was a twist, I was like, this better not be some absolute nonsense. But this is pretty dumb and doesn't really feel like it adds anything to the game, and it's just for shock value, and it doesn't make any... It's so contrived. It's like there are two very key things here. The fact that you and your wife are half siblings and that you killed her dad, or you're both of your dads, and having a mystery be based entirely on the fact that the main character forgot two very important bits of information is just very weak writing, and it's probably what leads to this game not feeling satisfying at all. Like, there's nothing intriguing about it once you just find out, oh, he forgot. Okay, that was a waste of 5 hours, but fine. And then, even though you think, okay, that was whatever, the game then does the ultimate cardinal sin when it comes to storytelling, where you find out, kind of, that it's all in your character's head, aka it's one step away from, it was all just a dream. It's just one unsatisfying layer on top of another unsatisfying layer when it comes to the story. So obviously by the end of it, I felt very, very dissatisfied. And just to have a personal whinge about this, on the first loop that I was playing where my character found out about the twist, my game crashed in the middle of his reaction. So he's in the middle of flailing and collapsing to the floor and crying, and then my game crashes out and restarts and goes back to the starting menu and the opening credits and all that. And for a moment I thought, oh my god, this is some kind of meta gameplay where I'm now stuck in the loop after finding out about the secret. This is incredible. But it wasn't that. It was just literally the game crashed and then sent me back to my autosave. Like, it was just stupid. And even for the brief moment where I thought there was some genius, it was also still just stupid. So not the best final impression that the game left on me. And that's essentially it. It's just a game that starts off very strong and has a solid concept and good ideas, but just subpar execution and a very, very poor final act. If the game had gone up to the point where you get to about 2/3 in and then ended, I probably would have come away feeling better about it. I probably would have thought, well, that was kind of short, that wasn't as much, but it was perfectly fine. Whereas with that final third of the game, it was more like, this has gone on for too long, I'm frustrated, I don't care anymore, this story is stupid, and I don't want to play it anymore. And one of the things people will always remember is the ending of your game. or the ending of anything that they experience. So if you are going to have something weak, let it be the middle or something. Don't let it be the final scene. So yeah, so that was 12 minutes. Play it if you have a few hours to kill and you want to hear James McAvoy and Daisy Ridley do American accents. Otherwise, I don't think it's fantastic, and I really don't think it was worth the devs team spending 7 years on it. But, you know, hopefully they have some success with this and they can then work on something that isn't like this, basically. If you've stayed to the end, thank you very much. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It's always appreciated. Like the video. And if you've played 12 minutes, please drop your thoughts in the comments and let me know what you think. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you agree with my feelings about all this nonsense? And yeah, see you in the next one. Bye!